Now, folks, there's only one view for this part. It makes sense. Would I need another view, right? How thick's a gasket material? Now, 0.1 or so, right? Metal gasket's even thinner. Paper gasket might be a little thicker, but we're talking, so there would be no reason to have a top or a right side view of this, right? This is the only view we need. So how do I approach this? Well, the first thing I do is I check to see if it tells me where to start it. In this case, it does say the center is 5,5. And what I tend to do is, just like within my views, I try to work myself counterclockwise around my part. So I go counterclockwise from, right, features within a view, and then counterclockwise between my views. Just works for me, and life is good if you have some sort of a standard to follow, because when you don't know what to do, you can just follow your standard, right? And it gives you, right, some guidance if you tend to be lost on something, a complex drawing or something like that, programming when I'm writing software, right? Okay, so I'm going to come right over here, and I'm going to start by, I'll draw this 1.9 radius arc, and I'm going to draw the inner 1.5. I don't need the 1.8 right now, and you'll see why in a second. So C for circle, absolute coordinate. So 5,5, enter. And I need what? A radius, which is the default, so 1.9. All right, now I'm going to type C for circle, and I'm going to use the @ symbol. What does the @ symbol mean? @ symbol represents the last point in your drawing. Right? So there's an actual variable, last point. Oh, not well. They even though I misspelled it, they got it right. So you can see what's stored inside of that variable, right? A placeholder in memory with a name where I can store data, right? Is 5,5, right? That's the last point, and it's the last point because that's the point I entered last, right? Okay, so if I want to use that last point, I can, and it would be a pain if I had to type last point to use it. So AutoCAD gives us an alias, and that's the @ symbol. So circle, it's asking me for the start point. I want the last point. So I could type @ enter, and it'll start at that last point for me. Kind of cool. 1.5 is the inner, right, radius. So this one right here. All right, so there's those two arcs. Did I change my layer? I did. So there's the two arcs that I need. And again, I eventually want to get to the right of my part, go counterclockwise around. Now, before I can get to the right, I need to establish this arc so I can then move 5.7 from this quadrant to get to my far right side and start going around my part, right? All right, now, here's the interesting thing about this arc. You'll notice that there is only one center mark here. So there's only one center mark for the arc and for the circle. And there's no other dimension here. So what does that tell me about the center of this arc? Well, it is 1.8 away from the center of this. Right? So this arc and this circle share the same center, 1.8 away. Now, something interesting over here. Do you notice this arc and this circle, there's only a single center mark. So does this circle and this arc share the same center point? Well, the answer is no in this case. And how do I know that? Well, if I come right up here, there is a dimension for the center of this circle that tells me it's 0.4 in the X direction from the center of this one. If this circle shared the same center point as this arc, just like these two, I wouldn't have to put a dimension there because it's the center of this arc. It would be over-dimensioned by ASME standards, right? So the reason I know, now you might be saying then, well, why isn't there two center marks? I'll show you that in a second. Okay, so let's get this arc in. We know it's a radius of 0.4, and we know that it's 1.8 from the center. So we'll do circle. I'm going to hover. I'll track 1.8. Direct distance entry, right? Enter, and 0.4 is the size of that. TR for trim. Now, folks, if I just start willy-nilly picking chunks, you notice I've got to chase my tail here. Right? So I'll have to click, click, and then click. But instead, what I could do is I could use the cutting edges modifier. Like I say, I want this to be the cut. Did I click the cut? I thought I did. Maybe I missed it. Let's try that again. TR for trim. I'm going to use the cutting edges modifier, and I want to pick this as my cutting edge. Hit enter because I'm just creating a selection set. And now when I pick to trim, it'll trim to that cutting edge only. It skips this edge right here. So I can just trim right up to that point. Right? TR for trim, and I can put that in there right there. Good. Okay, so I need another copy of this. So I need a copy up here. Let's see. There's 30 degrees between 90 and this circle, which tells me there's 30 degrees between 90 and this circle. How do I know? Well, it doesn't tell me that's not the case. And I see that this is, in fact, a polar array or a pattern that goes in a circle, right? So then there has to be 60 degrees between two of them. And that means there's 60 degrees between these two arcs. So what could I do to get a copy of this up here? Well, I could just rotate this. So if I right click, I can choose rotate, or however you choose to execute your commands, right? Do the rotate command. What command was that? ROI? RIO? What did I do? RIO. Folks, I have no idea what that command is. 20-something years of using AutoCAD, I've never seen that command. Not a clue. That's fantastic. I don't know what it does. It's not a command either. It's a variable. So you can see there's a 1 there. So it must be a variable that's 0, 1, 2. But somebody look that up, would you? I don't know what the heck that is. So RO for rotate. I can grab a copy of this. Enter. I'm going to pick the center here as my base point. Now, I do not want to just rotate it. I want to make a copy as I rotate. So I'm going to do copy. And how many degrees? I want to put it up here somewhere. I said there's 60. What should I type for that value? Anybody? Remember, AutoCAD measures angles counterclockwise for positive. So would this be 60 or would it be minus 60? Negative 60, right? If I were to type 60 right now, it's going to pop it down there. 60 degrees. Positive angles are counterclockwise. So I can do one more time, RO for rotate, enter. I'm going to pick this center as my base point. I'll type C for copy, and I'll do minus 60. So I can put a copy of that right up there. And while I'm here, maybe I'll trim a chunk of that out of there. Fantastic. All right, now I've established the far left. I can now establish the far right, right? L, enter. I'm going to hover at the midpoint or quadrant, start tracking, 5.7. Now I'm right here at this point. I'm going to come up 1. And the next thing I want to do is I want to draw this line that from that endpoint tangent to this 0.4 radius arc, but it doesn't exist yet. All right, so let's see if we can put that in there. Now, a couple of ways we can do it, bunch of ways. I could type C for circle. I'm going to hover and start tracking. And I know, right, from the center of this arc to the center of this arc is what? 2.5672. So if I add these two together, 272. That's how far I want to go in the X direction. And then 1.8 in the Y direction, correct? All right, so let's see how we could do that. C for circle. Well, I guess the one way, well, let's do that way next. I'm going to start tracking, and I'm going to type TT, and then hit enter. That asks me now for a temporary track point. You've all used temporary trackings already, and I'll show you where you used it in a second. I'm going to come over 2.72, and you notice it puts a little glyph there. Also notice there's a little glyph right from the center point where I started. So O track, which you all use to track 0.75 between your lines, just uses temporary tracking under the hood by default. All right, now, I don't want to get too close to the glyph. I'm going to move over it. And as soon as I move over it, it gives me a tracking point from that glyph. And what'd we say, 1.8 up? And now that circle is there, and I know that's 0.4 for that arc. Now, that's where that line is from here, tangent to there. Now, what else could I do? I don't know. I guess if all else failed, I could just start a line, come over here, 2.72, and then start tracking up 1.8, draw my circle at the end of that line, and then delete them and hope that the teacher doesn't check the command list that I used to do the drawing. I won't, but I don't know how you could feel good about yourself. Not sure I could. Folks, what else could we do? Well, we're going to talk more about this next week, but let me show you another way you could do this. Right? I'm going to type C for circle. Right? I just told you that the @ symbol represented the last point in the drawing. If I type @ enter right now, that's my last point up there, which was the center of that radius 4 circle I drew, right? Well, that's not where I want, right? I'm going to do C for circle one more time. I want to reset the last point. And the way I can do that is I can type FRO. FRO is an O-snap. It's not an O-snap that you can make a running O-snap. You can look, it's not there. But you now know you can shift right click or type the first 3 letters of any O-snap if you want it. As soon as I do that, it's asking me for the circle base point. I'm going to click right there. And what that did was it allowed me to reset the last point variable on the fly. Kind of cool. Now, why did I want to do that? Well, because now I can use that last point variable. I can say from the last point in this drawing, travel 2.72 in the X and 1.8 in the Y. So from the last point, which is the center of that circle, 5, 5, travel 272 in the X, 18 in the Y, and put that circle right there. That is called a relative coordinate, right? Now, did you know the absolute coordinate of this point? Now, you could have done the math, right? You could have said 5 plus 2.72 and 5 plus 1.8 to get that point, right? If I type ID, enter, we come over here. You could have done the math and got that. But I'll tell you, it's going to be very rare that the math would be that easy to do. It's going to be, some number of decimal places that go past the number that you could enter. So you wouldn't have an accurate drawing unless you use relative coordinates, right? Folks, we'll talk more about it next week, but thought it'd be good to show you. For now, I think the easiest thing to do is hover and track. TT for temporary tracking, just hit enter. You don't need your hands on the mouse anymore. 2.72, right? The distance I want to go in the X. Going to move above. Now, at this point, folks, I could type TT enter again and just put another temporary track point and keep going. I don't need to, though. I want to be 1.8 above that point. 0.4 allows me to put that arc in, and I can keep going now. Did I beat that to death enough? A little too much? Fair enough. Let's see what endpoint. Probably already a running O-snap. And then what? TAN for tangent. Pop that right there, right? L enter, TAN for tangent. TAN for tangent. Voila. Now, folks, I cannot tell you after saying this how many times I get this. Ooh, look at that. That quadrant's actually a lot easier than that tangent thing. Ooh, another quadrant. Let's just use those. It's kind of the same. It's close enough, right? Does anyone build engines? Build them for fun? Rip your dirt bike engine apart? Something, right? Yeah, that's not close enough, right? And so do make sure you use tangencies, right? This is not a tangency. It is a secant on both ends. Because I just went to the quadrant because that was handy. Hey, let's just do that. Piece of cake, right? Make sure they're tangencies. How could you check it? You could say EX for extend. Try to extend it. You can't. You could draw a line from here to the center of the arc, put a dimension between the two, DAN, dimension angular, make sure it's 90 if you wanted to, right? Okay. Let's see here. While we're here, could we trim that out of there? Good. We don't need that. Can we trim this out of here now? Yeah, we don't need that anymore either, right? Cool. All right, now we're almost at the point where we could do some mirroring here. Let's pop this, right, radius 0.8 arc in. Circle. Hover. Track. TT. Enter. How far? 2.2. So 2.2. Is that right? 2.2. Move above the glyph. And it is what? 0.7. You'll notice the dimension is below on the far right side, 0.7. And that is 0.8. So that's that one right there. Now, there's also a circle here. So if we wanted to, we could put this diameter 3.5. All I did was tap D so I could enter diameter. I could pop that in. I could put the center mark in too before I mirror it all down, but don't really need to. Okay. All right. So let me mirror this down. We'll clean it up and we'll take a break, and then we'll come back and we'll do the repeatable pattern. Right. So let's just finish this chunk. I'm going to use the mirror command. Grab everything. I'm going to hold down Shift though, and remove this and that from my selection set, because those are centered on the axis that I'm going to mirror through. And if I left those selected, it would just create copies on top of itself. And I don't want multiple copies, right? So I can now hit enter. It asks me to pick a first point from my mirror line. So I could pick the midpoint of that arc and then just track and pick any point with a 0 degree tracking. And it asks me, do I want to delete the source? Well, no, there's the whole point of mirroring it, right? No is in angle braces, so I could just hit enter to get that modifier. N for no, right? Okay, so a couple last things. I have what? Radius 0.6 here, radius 0.6 here, and a radius of 0.4 here. So let's go ahead and pop those in. Fillet radius 0.6. Is that going to work? See if we can fill it between two circles. Oh, that's pretty freaking cool. We just use a fillet to pop that in. Now, how else could have you done it? What do you think? Circle TTR? What if we do circle TTR? So I want to be tangent about here, and 0.6. And then you have to trim it up though and all that stuff, where fillet will actually do it for you. It's kind of neat. But let's do trim. I'll pick my cutting edges, and that would be a cutting edge. That would be a cutting edge. Enter, and then I would need to trim that to there. Cool. All right, and then one last time, fillet radius. This one is going to be a 0.4. You would be shocked how many times I get it as 0.6, even after saying this. It's 0.4. I started by telling you it was one of the 0.4s. Now I've just beat it to death. All right, it's 0.4, in case you didn't know. So I didn't warn you. That goes from there to there. All right, TR for trim. I'm going to pick the cutting edges. I'm going to pick the 3 arcs. So 1, 2, 3. Those are my cutting edges. Enter, and I can just trim that all out, just like that. Cool. All right, we're getting close. We need a repeatable pattern. We need another hole over here. Again, it does not. We can't just do this. Don't do it, right? So it doesn't share that center point. Why do I know that? Because it tells me it's 0.4 over from this. If it wasn't, then I wouldn't need that dimension if it did share the center point. Cool. All right, somebody remind me to put the record. I was just testing to make sure you guys were awake after the break. So now that I know everybody's focused. Nice. Okay, so one more time. Let's start with the right side here, and we need to get this a copy of this circle 0.4 over in the X, and then centered on the part. So could we CO for copy? Pick the base point. Start tracking. TT for temporary tracking. 0.4. Go below the glyph, and then 1.8. That'll get a copy down there, right? And if I select these two, you'll notice that they do not share the same center point. Now you might be saying, well, there's only one center mark, and yeah, sure, that's a good observation, but let's explain why in a second. Let's go ahead and set up for our center marks. I'm going to type dim cen, and I'm going to use a -0.07 for this one. Unlike Mod 2, we use 0.09. Both are within the range of the ASME standard, but 0.07 is going to work better here. So if I do 0.07 and I come up here, well, let's go on our center mark layer. So if I come here and I do DCE, oops, I get the center mark the way I want it. If I do DCE here, I get a center mark. But if I also put one here, does that create a drawing that's clear, concise, and unambiguous? No. So we would just leave that center mark for the arc out, right? And obviously we've got a DCE. We've got one here. Got one here we need, and we've got one here. Now we know we only have extension lines if they extend through the arc, so we'd want to get rid of all of those extension lines. And now that that right side is done, and we can focus on the repeatable pattern. All right, so folks, I want to kind of just focus on here for a second. And I just mentioned the term repeatable pattern. You think about that, we have this circle, right? We have the cross here. We have this line, which is part of the center line, and then we have these two lines, which are part of the center line. And if I zoom back out a little bit, what you're going to notice is all of that just kind of keeps repeating in a circular pattern around this part. If I can draw that repeatable pattern, we can use tools in AutoCAD to actually finish it, make your life a little bit easier. So let's start by drawing the circle where it goes. So where does it go? Well, it's 30 degrees from 90, which means from 0, it would be 60 degrees. So one thing you might say, well, what if we did this? What if I went to my polar tracking? I switched to 60 degrees, right? So 30, 60, 90. I start the circle command. I hover, and I start to track at 60. And you'll notice, even though my polar tracking is set, I cannot track at 30, 60, 90. Well, I can track at 90, but I can only track horizontally and vertically, right? Orthogonally. Why is that? Now, I'm going to right-click on the polar button. You can really right-click on any of these buttons. And I'm going to open up the track settings. If I go under polar, you'll notice that we're tracking orthogonally only. I can choose track using all polar angle settings. Now, folks, it's one of those things where if you use it, you're going to want to turn it right back off to orthogonally only. Otherwise, you have tracking vectors everywhere, and it makes for a nightmare. I never turn this on other than for this lesson, and then that's it. I'll show you how I would do it normally. But I'm going to turn it on and go back to circle again. And what you're going to notice now is I can track at 30. I can track at 60, right? Not just horizontally or vertically. And that is what, 1.8 away? Diameter of 0.35. Obviously, we're on the wrong layer here, but I'm going to erase it anyway. So let's go back. Oh, not 0, but object. Right? What else could we do? What if you're like, hey, I don't remember anything he said in the lecture, and I don't want to watch it again, but I want to solve the problem. Well, I don't know, could you do this? Could you just track from here this way, right? 1.8, diameter of 0.35, right? RO for rotate, grab it, enter, center point, and rotate it up 60 degrees. One way to get it up there. Again, I don't know if you'd be able to sleep at night. And if I found out, I'd cry in my pillow after I graded your assignment. So, right, hopefully. Now, another way you could do it too is with relative coordinates. Now, again, I'm just mentioning it because we're going to talk about them next week. But what if I did this? What if I do circle from here and I do at, right? Let's see here, 1.8 at an angle of 60 degrees. That's a pretty cool way to do it. Diameter of 0.35. So that is using relative polar coordinates. So, folks, I don't care which way you do it for now to get it up there, but do realize there's, multiple ways to solve that problem, even if you have to rotate it, right? Okay. All right, now what do we need? We need a center mark, and we can't just do this, right? So that's not going to fly. You might say, well, it looks kind of the same, but it's really not. Anytime we have a circular pattern, the actual line right here has to be an arc with the same radius as the pattern. Right? So how could we do that? Well, what if I'm going to change my layer. I'm going to go back to center here. What if I just leave this here as a template? I'm going to put a circle right here. Put another circle right there. Right? It's kind of cool. All right. And now, what if I draw a circle from here right up through here? Now, this little line arc segment right here is that segment that I want. So what I could do is I could TR for trim, 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 and now that is that arc segment that I'm looking for. Right? Kind of cool. Now, before I delete that, you notice I also have this extension line that extends from the center up to this line also. So let's do this. Let's do DCE. Let's go ahead and pop in center mark here. And now we can draw a line. It's going to be from here. And that can come straight up through there. And now we could trim that out too. So TR for trim. We could trim it here. We could trim it here. And I could get rid of all of this. And voila, right? We've got an arc that meets the ASME standard, right? It's an arc with the same radius of the pattern. And I also have my center line that runs up here through. All right, now, the only other thing I need is, for my repeatable pattern, is I need a chunk of this arc. So where does this arc stop when it gets to the next circle? Well, it stops when it bumps into this temporary circle. So if I had one of those over here, well, I could trim it. What if we just RO for rotate, grab this one and rotate it around the center, right, 60 degrees. Now I can trim that arc, delete that. I don't need these little lines anymore. And what I'm left with is a repeatable pattern I can use to create all of those. Right? Now, it might seem a little complex because it's the first time you've seen it. But once you've created a few of them, you'll be able to point them out relatively easy in a drawing and then use them to repeat. Now, one thing I'm going to do before I do it is I want the same little gap here. So you'll notice that my line goes right to the center. I don't want that. So I'm just going to draw a circle to here. TR for trim. I can trim that out and I can get rid of that. Now I've got my repeatable pattern. The command is array, AR. Don't do ARR because that puts on the action recorder. Very different command. And then you got to remember how to shut it off. And I never remember how to shut it off. ARR for array. I'm going to select these objects. Now I want a polar array. I could have a rectangular array. Let's say I'm trying to put windows on the facade of a high-rise building. Well, I'd want rows and columns of windows. Here I want a polar array, circular pattern. I'm going to pick the center. And by default, it gives me 6 items at 60 degrees. I could change the number of items, the angle between, and the angle to fill. Maybe I only want it to go 180 degrees. In that case, I do the same thing, but between 180 degrees. That's not what I want, obviously. 360, that's exactly what I want. I'm going to hit enter. Now, this is an array object. Relatively recently, about 3 or 4 years ago, they started, when you use the array command, it actually bound all the entities into what's called an array object. Before that, you were just left with circles and lines and whatever you arrayed. So in order to get rid of this chunk over here, I'll need to pick this, X for explode, enter. And now I can grab all of that and get rid of it. Now, same thing over here. I want this to have that same gap. So I'm just going to bring that right over to there. And I think that looks, I think it looks pretty good. Now you're going to notice something here like this line, but this line is an extension line for the dimension. Right? So you notice that this line extends through. We don't really need that in this case. So you can submit this just like this. Now you need a layout though. So it has to be laid out, and that's going to be no different than any other layout you've done. Right click, Page Setup Manager. Hopefully this is becoming second nature, I would think. High quality PDF, 11 by 17. 11 by 17. Let's try that again. That one, right? Choose OK, close that up, grab that. We can put that on my VP layer, which is no plot. Grab that, bring that up here. Bring this over. Double click inside. I can type Z for zoom, use the extents modifier of the zoom command, which zooms to the extents of my geometry. Get that nice and big on my screen. And then I can come right over here and I can choose a scale. Right? Now, you might say, hey, it looks like 2:1 might fit. And you're right, it probably does. The only problem is eventually you're going to have to add dimensions to this, and you would not have enough room to put your dimensions up here. I mean, you want to make it 2:1 for now, I don't care, but you'll have to unlock your viewport and in Mod 5, switch that to a 1:1 scale so you can add your dims. Obviously, as soon as you're done setting a scale, the first thing you should do, lock that viewport. That way, you don't accidentally change the scale. Folks, your title block goes in paper space, right? So once you're here, make sure you, and my virtual machine is chunky, sorry. Double click on the outside, you get to paper space, or you could use the button, right? Model, paper, double click inside model, double click outside paper, doesn't matter. I'm gonna double click in and get rid of the grid because it drives me nuts. Double click out for my paper, I for insert, I can browse, and I think I have a copy in downloads. I do not. So this is a rebooted virtual machine for me. So I don't have a copy of the title block here. Am I logged in then? I think I might be. What the heck was that? You guys there? Did I lose everybody? My virtual machine just take over.
Yeah, we're here.
Oh, there you go. My virtual machine just took over like all 3 monitors. So all I saw was AutoCAD. Everybody went away. What happened? I don't know. Okay, so let me go back to content here. Might as well finish this up while we're here and go to title blocks and B-size. I'll give you guys an architectural title block eventually. Cool. All right, so now let's jump back in. And now, if I go to downloads, probably have to, I did pop it in downloads, didn't I? I thought I did anyway. Let's try it again. Bring that up. There we go. B-size, perfect. Oh, that was last week. Why did all of a sudden that appear? 0,0. Make sure you put it at 0,0. All you do is type 0,0. Kind of surprised how many people just get here and just decide to drop it there. A little baffling. Let's see what PR03. This would be 03A. Click OK. And obviously make sure when you insert a drawing into another drawing, it'll just go on whatever layer is current. It doesn't go on the center layer, it goes on the border layer, which came in with the title block. So make sure you choose it. You can do a quick PRE. Realize that you forgot to fill out your title block, so you're going to need to create a text style with a Romanesque style, and obviously text 0.125 tall, and finish the rest of that. You want to see how to make adding your title block a lot easier? Check this out. If I open up, so physically open that title block, it's just a drawing. But ask you if you want to go into the editor, say no. Right. Ignore that. All right. You notice there's only one cool thing that happens is you automatically get to put in the title. Why? Well, obviously because of this thing. Whatever this thing happens to be, the rest of the right fields don't have one. Let's see what the heck that is. Properties. It's an attribute definition. So what is an attribute definition? It's a smart piece of text we can embed in a block. We haven't talked about blocks yet, but we will. I'm not talking about a title block. I'm talking about an AutoCAD block or symbol. But, I mean, could I just kind of reverse engineer this a little bit? If I knew nothing about nothing, except that when I insert this drawing into another drawing, I get to put text here automatically. Well, what if I did this? What if I just copied, come on, CO. At a bare minimum, what if I copied this and brought it over here? Now, I know title is 0.2 and everything else is 0.25, 125. So let's go to properties. And I could 0.125, I could change that. All right. That's cool. Bring that over there. Now you notice the justification's a little bit weird. And the reason the justification is weird on this is why? Well, over here, we have the justification in the middle, so it grows on both sides. It's probably not how you would want the justification over here. Here, you would want the justification to be on the left, right? So is there something here that allows us to change the justification of the text? I bet there is. Let's bring this out here. And if I go to justify, I don't want that. I want the, right? I tend to go with the bottom left. Right? So now that's the justification. And I can put that right there. And if I double click it, I don't want that to say title. I want it to say scale. And this is the prompt. So this is what you guys see in that dialog box. You could put I love bunnies in here if you want, but it's usually better to put something that's as brief as possible that lets the user know what you want them to stick there. So scale. Now I would also, in square braces, tell them the format I want the scale in, right? My mechanical drawings are always a ratio between paper space and model space, right? So I would do PS colon MS. Oop, MS, square brace, choose OK. Right? That's cool. And since I put that one in the wrong spot, let's move that down to scale. So now I could actually just copy that for the others, right? Be easy to have one for date. And for this, all I would have to do now is just double click and change this to date. Same thing, I'd probably put the format I want my users to put the date in. So maybe it's MM/DD, oops, /YYYY. 2 digits for the month, 2 digits for the day, 4 digits for the year. I want a / between. That way, right, all of the drawings that we create, thousands at the company I work for, everyone's not putting dates in however they want, right? You get hired by a company to draw a, $500 million high rise, and you give them, right, thousands of sets of drawings, and the date's different on all of them. The format wouldn't lend confidence in the company, I don't think, right? Standards. So folks, you could do that for all of this, right? Instructor, course number, if you have multiple courses, the section, I don't care what you put for the section. For you guys, it's, they're all different ones. Drawn by, you could just put as text. So if you wanted to, just stick your text in there, right? All I have to do is come here and DT 0.125, right? Enter, enter. Put my name in there. Now I never have to fill that out again. Unless you're planning on changing your name or being forced to. If that's the case, then, leave it as an attribute, whatever works, Witness protection, you're on the fly, you want to take your title block with you, you got to change your name, leave it as an attribute. Otherwise, just hard code text. Again, even for the instructor or course, right? If this is the only course you're going to take and it's with me that you're going to use this title block for, just hard code all of this. That'll never change, right? Okay, cool. All right, so now we can give this a save. I'll do a save as. And, just maybe put my initials on the end of it or something. Save that up. Come back over. Now I can get rid of that one. And instead, let's bring in mine. So that would be this one right here. 0, 0. And now I can fill out all of those things, right? I don't have to go to the text command later, try to get it to be exactly where I want it to be or any of that stuff. As long as those fields are all laid out in that block that I'm inserting perfectly, that's where the text's going to go, right? So PR 03A, is that right? Scale was 1:1. And the date was 09 / anybody? Something, 13 / 2022, right? Oop, 22. And that's going to make your life a heck of a lot simpler than every single time having to go and add that text. All right, now, one last thing. It's time to do drawing 4 or drawing 3B, right? You've got this drawing. It's all done. It's fantastic. You saved it. File, save here. And it's going to be for me, PR 3B. So I can open this thing up. Come in here, get rid of the geometry, file, save as. The other one was 3A, by the way. This one was 3B, but you get the point. 3A, save. Now I got a nice blank drawing. All my layers are here, ready to go, right? I've got my title block already inserted. Obviously, you got to make sure you change your scale and date and such if you need to, but it's all ready to go, and it'll make your life a heck of a lot easier. There are other ways to do it, but there's one simple way for now. I'll show you how to create some templates at some point. Good. Makes sense. Helpful. A little helpful. Not helpful. Hopefully a little bit. Cool. Cool. How's print reading going? Having fun? Good times? Nice. Fantastic. Cool. Does anybody get to use True Shape yet? It's coming. Just spit it out in the middle of the lecture. Just while Dan's talking, just yell out True Shape. Freak them out a little bit. It'll be all right. Cool. All right. I'm going to stop the recording, and you guys can lap time, or if you got something better to do, you can